My family was leaving a swim meet on December 1st of 2007 at noon in the afternoon, like driving on a 55-mile undivided road when in a straightaway, a car at the last second crossed the center line. And so there was no skid mark. So the police report had the impact speed at 125 miles an hour.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Shift Podcast. I'm here with John. Hello, John.
Hey, Matt.
Well, thank you for wanting to be a part of the Life Shift Podcast. I don't know another way to say this, so I say it every time. So people that listen every week, the Life Shift Podcast is like this experience that I never could have imagined for myself. Because when I was 8, my dad had to pull me in his office when I was visiting him. My parents lived states apart. I lived with my mom full time. And he had to pull me into his office and tell me that my mom had been killed in a motorcycle accident. And at that moment, that life shift moment for me at 8, everything felt like everything's going to change. Nothing about my life, nothing that we dreamed for my future was ever possible. Because at 8, you're like rug pulled out and there's nowhere to stand. And the time period was like 89, 90s, and nobody was talking about grief. Nobody was talking about mental health. It was like a kid, he'll bounce back, he'll be fine. So I assumed that role and just took over and had to be perfect and showed everyone that I was just fine. Behind the scenes, not so much. And I say all that because behind the scenes, when I was pushing grief down and trying to figure out life kind of on my own in a way, I always wondered, do other people have these line in the sand type moments where everything from one second to the next has changed and there's nothing they could do about it? So now I've talked to over 200 and something people now about these pivotal moments and learned that it's not just these external moments that can happen to us, but sometimes really cool people like have that fire inside of them and then they create the change, which was totally not on my list of things to do because I was just trying to survive. So this journey, nothing I could have ever experienced or imagined experiencing. So thank you for just being a part of the Life Shift Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. And I mean, I get that concept so much. And I think again, what you do, what I do, and as we get into that, is very much about taking something that was a tragedy or something in your mouth, in your life that was a trauma, and reframing it into something that at the very least you can spin it into something positive, that you can find a way to make a positive change in something versus being stuck in this rut of poor me situations.
It's so easy to stay in the poor me situations. Just from my perspective, for 20 plus years, I was just in that, but I also didn't have the tools. I didn't know better and people weren't talking about it. So that's why we do what we do. We talk about it because I think by talking about it, it gives permission to other people to also talk about it or to know that they're not alone in whatever they're feeling and that there are ways to kind of move through the world differently.
Well, that, and I think, you had to develop tools. I would say the same thing for me. Like a lot of it was trial and error. A lot of it was mistakes that I learned from and some positive things that I probably didn't learn as much from as I did from the mistakes. And ultimately, my journey 17 years long from when it started till today. And I always say, like, I have a book that's out now that the second part of my book I couldn't have written, even 5 years ago. I needed to continue to understand the journey. And now I just okay, you can do it the way I did it. Or if you want to take what I learned and maybe speed up the process a little bit, you still have to go through it. I mean, you had to go through it. I had to go through it. But take my lessons that I learned and use them to maybe make fewer mistakes, or at the very least have more of a path or more of a roadmap, if you will, to follow. I would say that's what your podcast is. It's to everybody you're interviewing is just, for those of us who listen to it are like, yeah, I can take something from that and I can put it into my own situation and, maybe expedite my growth, I mean, I will say the experiences I've been going through just from doing the podcasts and talking a ton right now. So we haven't even talked about the fact I have a book that just made a USA bestseller list today. Super excited
Congrats.
about it.
Yeah.
But I've been doing a lot of speaking for the book over this year. And what I'm finding is, and I'm doing a lot of podcasts and one-on-ones. Every time I do one of these situations like you and I are having today, what I take away from both being asked questions I never thought about before. We kind of talked about off camera. I love being challenged after all these years of something that somebody asked me something I didn't think of before, and allowing myself to put in a framework. When I'm a keynote speaker, I control the dialogue, right? I'm giving something. I learn more in the Q&A afterwards than I ever get from speaking. But doing interviews, I love interviews because I'm getting something. I mean, I'll walk away from this today, Matt, and take something that you told me and incorporate it into my journey. And I don't have to be the focus. That's what's great about podcasts.
Yeah. I think it just I hope it encourages just more conversation too, just in general, like in people's own circles, because like that permission that we talked about, or people hear your story and maybe they're not taking the tools exactly that you use to get to where you are, but something about it gives them hope.
Yeah.
That like, okay, all this dread that I'm feeling right now in the moment where everything feels insurmountable, maybe I can do this. And maybe some of the tools will work for me, because Lord knows my journey is probably not as, is not exactly the same as anyone else's, right? Like we all kind of have to find what works for us, but seeing someone else that can do it, I mean, just, it gives you that hope. It gives you, I don't know. For me, I just felt like I was the only one with a dead mom and I knew I wasn't, but you just feel like, oh God, how do I, like, what is life? Yeah. So, we hear from others and we give permission to others by having these open conversations about just being a human.
Yeah. And I've noticed recently that, the most important thing that you can take from any type of learning experience is teaching it. Like I talk constantly now about, fine, you can listen to me speak for an hour, but if you don't leave here and go sit down with your family, significant others, friends tonight and have a conversation about what you heard today, then I probably didn't do my job. If you don't come away from this podcast and tell somebody like the experiences that you learned today, then we're probably not doing our job, because it's not enough to just write a book and put the information into the world. We need a conversation.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I think, and we need it now more than ever. I think more people just need to talk to each other and create, because you know what? I've heard so many stories, so many wildly different stories. And I know this is like so cliche and we hear it all the time, but it is so true that even though I cannot relate directly to someone's event or experience, the feelings we have around all those things are so similar. So like, if nothing else, that's how we relate as humans. It's like the actual feelings that we have and the things that we go through. So yeah, I love it. Let's get into your story though. First, before we do, you gave us a little hint of today's big news, but 2025, John, how do you show up in the world? How do you identify these days?
So I am now a best-selling author.
I love it.
I wrote a book called The Upside of Down. That book is a two-part book. The first part of that book is sort of a memoir of my story from the day I was in a horrific car accident with my family. I've had 45 surgeries. I have never gone a year without one. I was given a 3% chance of survival. Was 18 days in a coma. And then had numerous setbacks where I was back in the hospital again, back on ventilators again. And so I've been a speaker, a motivational speaker. I've been a coach to other people dealing with adversity. The tagline of my Upside It Down is a guide to turning success or setbacks into success. And ultimately, I think now more than ever, it's not so much about success. It's more about turning setbacks into fuel. We're looking to take something that's a setback and using it in a positive way to propel ourselves forward, right? What does fuel do? Fuel propels rockets. Fuel propels cars forward. So, I used to focus on trying to motivate people for success. Now I just try to let them take their setback, turn it into something that can propel them forward.
Yeah.
Which is all what we're trying to do in most setbacks, is stop the progression backwards, right? And ultimately try to stabilize and move forward. And that journey can be 17 years, like it has been for me. It can be a lifetime journey for people. I don't think I am dealing with chronic pain without narcotics. I have all this nerve damage. And so my left leg feels like it's asleep all the time. I was told I couldn't walk, and, I do all these things, but it's a journey that never stops. Because it's just, you want to talk about whether something happens that you propel yourself forward, or something happens like what happened to you or what happened to me. My family was leaving a swim meet on December 1st of 2007 at noon in the afternoon, like driving on a 55-mile undivided road, when in a straightaway, a car at the last second crossed the center line. And so there was no skid mark. So the police report had the impact speed at 125 miles an hour. So we were going 55. The other driver was going 70. And, I always tell people, like, I'm not a first responder. I'm not one of our soldiers. I wasn't even, I would say I wasn't even a motocross, motorcycle racer. I was a dad driving home from a swim meet. Anybody with children has been coming home from a ballet practice or or soccer, or pick your sport or pick your kid's activity, 1:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday. I mean, it was a freak situation. And literally at the age of 36, my life was turned completely upside down.
Yeah.
And I've lived that journey ever since.
Do you find, yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'm sorry that's just terrible, because, and like you said, it's so many of us just do these things, right? Like, we're just living our life. We're doing the things that we did last Saturday. We're doing the things that we, and we're just going along, and then something completely out of our control like that happens and shakes not just your day, but like your entire life moving forward. And now this unplanned version of your life happens and unfolds in front of you.
Yeah. And in my particular case, or in the case of my family, my kids were 8 and 4. My wife was in the car at the time. We were all together. We were all injured. The other driver died at the scene. I mean, he was not wearing a seatbelt on top of all of this. God. And he died instantly. I mean, I was given less than a 3% chance, and was bleeding to death. I mean, all these internal injuries, never mind. My pelvis was shattered. My back was shattered. My left leg was shattered. That stuff, my spleen and diaphragm had ruptured. My left lung had collapsed. My heart was damaged. Like, those were the things that were going to kill me. Never mind the, spine or vertebrae and pelvis. The internal bleed, I took 38 units of blood in the first 12 hours, and a normal sized man would hold like 8 units of blood. So I bled out 4 times. Wow. Just in that first 12 hours. So my injuries, there are some things now that we know that were very unique. I had a damaged heart. That heart tissue died out over like a 6-month period of time. At the time, I was the only person in the world that they knew with this traumatic VSD, a hole between the right and left ventricle that was caused by the heart tissue dying later on. And the only reason was because I should have died from 6 or 7 other injuries before this ever became a thing. Unfortunately, over the last few years, through a bunch of other doctors, particularly some Israeli doctors, I've learned that it wasn't airbags or the steering wheel that did all this internal damage. It was the concussive vibration of 125-mile impact, which would be the equivalency of being in, a 10-yard radius of a bomb going off. Mm. And so it was the vibrations that ruptured all these hollow organs, my spleen, my diaphragm, my heart, my eyeballs. And they didn't know this 17 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
we know it now because unfortunately people are around explosives, soldiers, a lot of the crazy stuff that's been going on in Israel and Palestine. They're seeing that someone doesn't necessarily have to be at the center of a explosion.
Right.
Just being in the radius of it will kill you, to cause your organs to rupture. And so now they're seeing some other people with this heart issue that I have, but it was still very rare because generally other things would have killed you.
Yeah.
And so it's this knowledge that keeps coming because I keep living this journey.
Right. Well, and fortunately they had enough knowledge to help you survive. I know you had all the complications and all the surgeries, but like now they probably have even more tools and equipment to help someone in that same situation. I mean, I think of my mom died, 36 years ago, and she was in a motorcycle accident. And now this is the first time I'm really kind of putting these things together. But like I expected when I saw her in the funeral home to see like a shattered kind of person, right? Like I think that's just what you imagine. But she died in similar ways to what you said happened to you, like from her spleen, rupturing and from internal bleeding. And it was all that. And it's like, I don't think a lot of us think about that unless it's kind of happened to us or in our family. And it's just so scary that like stuff we can't see is can happen in that way. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I would love to back up slightly and see like what your life was like leading up to that. Like who were you, so we can get an idea of how that really shifted your life into this new version, which I'm sure has its highs, but also a crap ton of lows.
Yeah. So that again, 36 years old, married to the woman I started dating in high school, 2 children, 8-year-old daughter, the one who was swimming that day, 4-year-old son, running successful businesses together with my wife. I mean, literally I talk about in the book with one of the strange parts about our story is when we left that we were at a high school indoor swimming pool for the swim meet. And we pulled out and turned right and went a different way home than the way we came there. So, and it was a choice because there was a private prep school, boarding school, close by. And one, we thought, maybe it's December 1st. Maybe they have holiday decorations up. We basically bribed our 4-year-old son, James, that if he behaved himself at the swim meet, we would go cut down a Christmas tree when we were done. Easter or Thanksgiving that year was just like the Thursday, like this happened December 1st. It was just Easter or Thanksgiving on Thursday. So they were still on Thanksgiving break. We were in a very, I would say, idyllic relationship. Like our kids, we were making good money. We weren't extremely wealthy, but we were successful. Mm-hmm. The idea that we could send our kid to a boarding school, a prep school if they wanted to was something that we didn't grow up with, each of us. And the fact that we could financially consider that tells you a little bit about where we were financially. And so, yeah, I mean,
I like the American dream.
Yeah, it was pretty ideal situation. Again, going into the holiday season, my wife was family-owned jewelry store, so it was always a really busy time for her. And so for her to even be with us on a Saturday at that time was sort of a big deal because that's when things get real busy and she generally wants to be at the store. So the fact she was even with us in the car for the car accident was also kind of unique for that time of year. It just showed that, we were putting a little more commitment into being part of our kids' lives at a time instead of obviously maybe working.
Does that get complicated mentally, like emotionally complicated of the choices that we as humans just take and you happen to go a different direction or your wife happened to not be at work? Does that play games in your head at all? Or did it?
Yeah. So it particularly, so my kids were 8 and 4. And so they don't really, they're now 26 and 22. So they don't, particularly my 4-year-old son at the time, doesn't know really a life that wasn't their dad having surgeries, like me in a wheelchair. That's sort of what they would consider they're normal, right, at this point. But sometimes when they make some comment, especially as teenagers, about something being not fair or something, I would say, yeah, we should have turned left instead of right. So and on some level, it would play games, but I don't know. It's like getting back in a car for the first time. There were certain things that I was just like, I could literally convince myself that I never want to get back in a car ever, or convince myself that the world is out to get me, or that I shouldn't have survived, or that I survived for some super great purpose. And eventually I landed on, I survived so my kids would have a dad. Mm-hmm. I mean, your mother passed away when you were 8. You could have that conversation about the fact that had she survived, how would your life have been different?
We would
my kids, when I was given a 3% chance and I survived, then I struggled with this survivor's remorse, particularly the other driver who was on the other car died. I had lots of questions, and eventually a friend who happens to be a pastor said to me, maybe you just survived so your kids have a dad. Like maybe it's just that simple.
Yeah.
Don't make it more complicated.
Yeah. I just think as humans, like it's natural to have those. I think it would be natural to have those thoughts of these what ifs, or why did we do it this way, or whatever. And however we choose to move forward with that, that's just how we are. Was it in your nature to be more accepting of like what your pastor said before the accident? Were you someone that was like that, or were you more of like a what if kind of?
No,
kind of
I had my own little kind of moments growing up as well. I was dyslexic. I had a speech impediment. I stuttered. I probably had some level of that stuttering through high school. I learned to hide it a little bit, right, or speak really fast to mask it a little bit. Growing up, that was, first of all, I'm 54 years old. So to even identify, dyslexia back then was a big deal. I was probably like 4th grade till anybody realized I couldn't read. And I went to a really small school. Like I graduated 60 some kids in my high school. So I grew up in a very rural, small area as well. And so I think I would say I had more thick skin related to that. I was also sort of a late developer. So all of a sudden, when I'm turning 18, then all of a sudden I'm 6'2", I'm 185 pounds of muscle. But that wasn't me. I was a 150 pound little kid as a freshman and sophomore. Like I was, I'm sure you've experienced, like there's that kid in 8th grade who can shave, and he's no bigger in 10th grade or 11th grade than he was in 8th grade.
Right.
And then there's the kid who is 6 feet tall, and when he's a freshman and when he's a senior, he's 6'5". You're like, I was that late bloomer. So I also had this kind of like had to do it the hard way before it became easier.
You knew battles before, but nothing. Yeah. I mean, nothing like this accident.
Yeah. And honestly, the other part of it was I was a marathon runner. So I ran track in high school and college. I went to Division III school and ran track. I was a hurdler, a state champion hurdler in high school. And when I got out of college, I just kind of picked up distance running because I needed to continue to do something. And, I talk a lot about athletic mentality, people who are part of doing, athletes, theater kids, musicians. I always talk about the fact that, if you don't love the process, you're never going to be great at anything. And I think sports and music particularly are great examples of something in which if you hate practice, you'll never be good, right? And so the day that the accident happened, I ran 13 miles. It saved my life because my left lung had completely collapsed when my diaphragm collapsed. I was under 10% body fat. So when they had to cut me open and they cut me from sternum to pelvis, just trying to stop the internal bleeding, I didn't have all this extra visceral fat that would be in there if I was a little overweight. And those things, again, became tools that allowed me to push myself through my recovery a little bit harder. But it's because I experienced hard things before.
Mm. Did it push you because you were like a runner to be able to recover enough to try to get back to that? Because if you love it so much, I mean, I just talked to she's like 20, and her dream was to play basketball, right? So she got drafted to Iowa, was playing with Caitlin Clark, and then her family got hit by some guy on fentanyl, and she had a traumatic brain injury, and she can't do what she did. And part of it was like, do I even want to live because I can't do this stuff anymore because of the TBI, and it's too dangerous now for her. So I think of someone like yourself who had a passion for that. Clearly, if you're going to run 13 miles just, for fun, that you would probably want to get back to something like that. Was that a big driver for you?
It was. And in some ways it was sort of a false idol for me.
How so?
Because it was a motivation, particularly like as soon as I was in the hospital. I was in a coma for 18 days. I was in the hospital for about 23 days. And then I was non-weight bearing because of all my pelvis being shattered, my back being shattered. I had to go live in a nursing home for 8 more weeks, lying flat on my back. And so when I was there, I was like, oh, I'm going to run again. I'm going to, and meanwhile, I couldn't move either of my legs. And even when I went to rehab, I couldn't use my left leg at all. And so it wasn't a realistic expectation. But what I struggled with as I started my journey to kind of get back my life. So like the battle became to get my life back. And I had so much emphasis on getting my life back to what it was that I was missing the fact that it wasn't going to be what it was. Like that wasn't going to be a possibility. And so I had to really accept what my life could be. Right. And what did I want it to be? And so my transformation came from me after 2.5 years, literally quitting outpatient rehab when my daughter, who was then 10, came into my office after being outside in the yard kicking a soccer ball around, telling me that she missed her old daddy, the one who would come outside and train with her. And again, believing that I was here for my kids to have a father, I was not living up to her expectation. I quit rehab the next day and started working out with teenagers with special needs, Down syndrome kids, at my local YMCA. Yeah. And that journey was all about like, oh, I'm going to run again. I'm going to go back to do what I did. And realistically, I have all the circulatory problems. I can't run. And even when I was able to finally get to the point that I could do a 5K, so like 3.2 miles, I couldn't run faster than a 12-minute mile. Mm-hmm. And I had run the day, so I told you the Thanksgiving was right before. So I ran a 5K turkey trot with my family that day. I ran under 7-minute mile pace that day. So I could almost half as slow. And I was like, this is horrific. Like I'm not going to enjoy doing something that I could do at such a high level and not be able to do it now and have this expectation. So I just found another purpose. And I went from an 180 pound marathon runner to 5 years later being 210 pound guy who could bench over 300 pounds. Like I had to find a new avenue for it. Yeah. Like I still had the passion to push myself. And initially it was like push myself to be able to walk, push myself to get out of a wheelchair, push myself to be able to stay on a walker and not have to use a wheelchair to go across a parking lot. Like those were the initial struggles, but then eventually it became, okay, you've got to find something that gives you that passion again, something that the process becomes more beautiful than the outcome. And it wasn't going to be running. Like no matter what, whatever goal I set for myself would literally just be a reason to prove to myself that I could do it. Yeah.
Was it helpful at first though? Was like the running goal or trying to get back, was that helpful at least to kind of give you a little fuel to get going?
It did. And it's funny you use the word fuel because that's literally what I kind of look at most of these setbacks, today is a little bit of fuel to propel you forward. Right. And so it was a motivating factor. Other motivating factors came in the picture because the more I worked out at the Y with, I worked out with this kid at the time. It was 16 years old. His name was Danny, and Danny had Down syndrome. Danny was strong as an ox. And I don't know if you've ever spent time with a lot of people with Down syndrome, but happiest, most positive individuals you've ever met. And so that experience of me coming in there on a walker, and I felt comfortable at 10 a.m. doing it because all my normal crew of friends and people were already in and out and back at their job, right?
Yeah.
So it was like these 14 special needs kids with their trainers, a bunch of retired old people. And I just felt like I was in a positive environment, right? One of the things you can see just even on camera here, like all my scars are under my clothing. Like I had no head trauma. Was a huge blessing, but like I'm cut from sternum to pelvis 3 times open, big blue suture stitches, pelvis. My legs are purple and swollen from all the circulation issues that I've had. But in a pair of pants and a t-shirt, you wouldn't know it. And, I almost walk with very little of a hitch in my gait any longer. And so for most people on the street, they would be like, that guy looks great. He looks healthy and in shape. And the reality is on paper, I look horrific. I shouldn't be alive. And I haven't gone a year without a surgery.
Yeah.
But when I was surrounded with those types of,
it's infectious, right?
Yeah. They were just, what I learned was that I liked the process more than the results. Like I liked the repetitive type of thing that running gave me. Like I liked going to the gym every day. I also fell in love with the fact that I could cause myself pain that I could control versus pain that was out of my control. I deal with chronic pain all the time.
So
and part of the reason I'm as strong as I am, it wasn't because I set some goal that I wanted to be able to lift this amount of weight. It was all built around the fact that I wanted to make myself sore. I wanted to tear muscle fibers like I did when I ran. I wanted to test my body's ability constantly because if I was sore the next day from that activity, that was on me. Like I controlled that. And when I deal with chronic nerve pain and chronic pain all the time, it's just a reminder of what happened to me. Everything about it feels negative.
So the pain that you can create for yourself kind of brings a joy in a way that like, I did that.
Sense of control.
Yeah.
For sure.
Does it bring you joy? Like, joy is the wrong word, but I think it signals progress too for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I lifted heavy yesterday. Like, so I pushed it a little bit farther. And so there is a little bit of progress joy that could come with it.
Yeah. I've had the opportunity recently to talk to high school athletes and college athletes. And what's interesting that I keep bringing to their attention is in a world where you can buy just about anything, right? I can get Botox and look less wrinkly on your camera. I can go take drugs to lose weight. I can go have fat liposuctioned out of my body. The thing you can't buy is muscle. And I'll have a high school kid like raise his hand and say, well, what about steroids? I was like, well, I like that you don't understand how steroids work because that means no one's talking to you about them. 2, steroids only work if you work out. Like they don't just give you muscle by injecting testosterone into your body. Like right. It helps you to recover and helps you to grow muscle faster. But the one thing you can't buy is muscle.
Yeah.
And, so for me and my journey, part of it is this fitness part of my journey that really came from just trying to make my body strong enough. Like I'm missing half of my abdominal muscles. I just have Gore-Tex mesh because they weren't able to fasten them back together. And so I had to compensate for the fact that my core was weak. I had to compensate for the fact that my left leg, I had no feeling in it. What that is gaining muscle, and what gaining muscle represents is that my body is strong even at 54, but I don't look at it as this, like I look at it as a tool and not a vanity thing. for me. Now,
which is probably a healthy way. Do you feel that in this journey that, like, what was a percentage, I guess, let's play this game, percentage of times that you felt empowered, positive towards building, and percentage of like, I just want to quit. I hate this. This is the worst experience, like in your soul, not necessarily in your body and pain.
mm-hmm. So in the nursing home, after I left the hospital,
just part of this journey
often I wish I'd died.
Okay.
I mean, I'm laying in bed paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in excruciating pain. I can't sleep. I'm literally helpless. I can't brush my own teeth. I can't do anything that doesn't require a nurse or an aide to do it for me. So I always say, there's a big difference on having trust or faith in something or someone when you could go do it yourself if they don't do it, right? It's a very different level of trust when you literally have to rely on another person or system to do what you can't do for yourself. I never experienced that. I was 36 years old. Since I was a child, I didn't have to rely. I had employees. Right. I ran a business. But if I asked somebody to do something and they didn't do it and it's 8:00 at night and it needs to be done, well, I can go do it. To answer your question, I've had, times where they'd come back and tell me, okay, well, after this procedure, this surgery, you can't lift more than 10 pounds. So 10 pounds is like a 1 gallon jug of milk, right? For the next 8 weeks. Now I had been working, trying to get stronger, doing all these things. And now you're telling me I'm not going to be able to go do that again. And then, sometimes I would go a year or two where mentally I just was like, I don't have it in me. One of the first main teaching parts of my book and what I teach about is commitment. And everyone says, commitment's the most important thing. It is, but understanding that you might not be in a place to be committed is also just as important. And giving yourself a little grace to understand that I'm not in a place right now, either mentally, I don't have the support cast, I don't have the actual things that I need in my life to take on this commitment. It doesn't matter who's telling me I need to make this change or do this thing. You might believe it, but reality is you're not in the right headspace to take on this challenge. And I've had to learn that over time.
That's huge.
I should do this, but I don't want to.
Acknowledgement is just, I think, self-acknowledgement of like these, that we're not always going to be perfect. We're not always going to be like meeting whatever other people think of us. I think it's a huge thing because I think so many of us, like it creates, at least for me, it creates like this extra shame if I don't commit or make it to the next level because everyone's like, oh, you should be doing this. And I'm just like, look, today sucks. And it just is, and it's not always going to be like this, but today I can't do it. But that takes a lot.
Yeah. But you know what though? When you can say that, then the reality is that where you need to get to, you're probably going to go there eventually. Yeah. Because, I would always say, I'd ask people all the time, am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I doing what in the speaking? Am I writing and generally, smarter people than me would say, if you're asking the question, you're probably okay. If you're admitting that you're not in a place right now to tackle whatever this thing that's standing in your way, you probably will eventually because you've acknowledged it. You know it's there in your life. You also know it's something that you need to do, but you also know you don't have the tools right now. You don't have the time. And so capacity is as important as commitment. Like you've got to have the space to do it.
But I think so many people just fake it, right? Like we just pretend, and then it ends up hurting us in the end because maybe sometimes.
Well, here's the other part of it. I think if you're not committed and you're not literally, again, the seventh pillar I talk about is like falling in love with the process. If you don't end up loving what you do, whether that's going to the gym, whether that's running a podcast, whether that's relationship based, if you don't fall in love with the process and you're just so focused on the finish line or the outcome of it, it doesn't generally change your life. We know people all the time who make health changes, lose all this weight, but they hated every part of it. But their doctor, their significant other, somebody's telling them, you have to take care of your health. And so they go through the process for a year, hit the goal that they set, and immediately over the next 3 years, rebound back to where they were. And in my experience, it's always because they never enjoyed and found any real joy in the process. So it was always doing something that you had to do, but you don't love.
You just described like the first 30 years of my life.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I was not living for myself. I was living out of fear that my dad was also going to leave, even when I was 20 something. Like I was just getting the next job, getting the, doing checking all the boxes, thinking, okay, the next one's going to bring me the happiness that is on this list, that we're supposed to do. And so I never really found myself enjoying the process until after I kind of closed that door on grieving my mom. So curious, did you always love the process of the things you were doing, like track and stuff when you were a teenager, or it was more of like a win?
Track I did. The running I did. Part of it, I think, was I enjoyed the fact that I was good at it. Right. Mm-hmm. So now good in a small pond versus good in a big pond. So like I had opportunities to go to Division I schools and run hurdles. And I would have been the 8th best runner out of 8 on that team. Instead, I went to a small Division III school and I was the MVP my freshman year. So there is something to be said in putting yourself in the right environments for success as well. Right. But no, even today, there are things that I constantly am like, why am I still in this? Why am I still doing this? I'm 54 years old. Like I need to get my life going in the most positive ways I can. And then sometimes I'm the worst at listening at my own advice.
You're not the only one.
Yeah. And so again, this benefit of holding a mirror up to myself by doing podcasts and speaking and doing coaching is as much a growth opportunity for me as it is. In my case, I think a lot of times it even more benefits me than the person I'm speaking to. Yeah. Now, they may feel the other way around, but for me, my journey over the last year and a half again has been significantly influenced by having an opportunity to talk to people like yourself that are just out there trying to figure out what is this journey supposed to be? What are the lessons? Mm-hmm. Let me talk to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
And let me gather that knowledge. And like I said earlier, the most important part of it to me right now is sharing it. Like there's no benefit for me to write a book that nobody wants to read, even if it's the most brilliant things I've ever written. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And if nobody wants to talk about it afterwards, then it what good is the knowledge? Because what's the saying? The best way to learn is to teach. I mean, I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Do you find that you learn more about your story the more you share your story?
Yeah, a ton. Interestingly enough, too, I've had the great opportunity to speak to a lot of what I would consider men who are thought leaders, who are looking at what it means to be a man in this world today. We've talked a little bit off camera about mental health, and that was a big part of my life that wasn't in there after the car accident until the last few years. I really had to stop worrying about all the surgeries that my body was going on and get real with the mental part of it that I was just ignoring. And part of the reason I got more and more comfortable with it is because I had an opportunity to talk to more and more people who were comfortable talking about it. And, when we do things like this, it's an open forum for us to discuss. I mean, you and I are having a conversation. There will be thousands of other people who are going to listen to this later, right? And meanwhile, it feels very intimate right now.
Right. Yeah, I think I learned that. I learned one part of it is like the stories that I was hearing in my head about my story were so messy. But when I started sharing my actual story, I was like, okay, that makes sense. That aligns. Like, and now I see why I did all these things. So it like really took a bunch of messy puzzle pieces and kind of like put them all in the right order. But every time I share a little bit more, it's like something new comes out. I'm like, this has been my story for like almost 40 years now. And it keeps unfolding in ways because maybe I know myself better now. And now I can see the patterns and things that happen that way. But again, to your point, like when we have this conversation, my goal is twofold. One, I want people to listen. Maybe they're in an experience. They've just been in a terrible accident. They're facing all of these challenges. They hear you and they're like, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that's ever been through this. There's some hope. But also I hope it influences others to just tell each other things and not just talk about like, I got a promotion at work or check out my new car or all the things that growing up, probably you and myself, we were taught that those were the things we talk about. We don't talk about the messy things because people might think a certain way.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because again, my story or my family story really resonates with a lot of people simply because of the sheer fact that it could have been them. Like, I would, during the recession, 2010, 11, 12, I was speaking a lot on bigger stages for corporate events, for financial companies, for manufacturing companies. And what I was the guy who spoke at the breakfast of the last day. So all the bad numbers, all the sales reports that weren't hitting goals, and, the housing market was bad. You couldn't get a mortgage. It was pick your industry, and everybody was having a little bit of a struggle. But for anybody sitting in the audience who was a parent, for instance, could easily say that could have been me. Like, there's nothing about what John was doing that day that we're probably not going to do this weekend.
Right.
And so it resonated in the sheer fact that, one, it could happen to them. It's a freak thing that could happen to anyone. There's lots of 55-mile undivided roads all over the United States. Two, that what I was able to do after I woke up from the coma, I always say, like, God and great surgeons are the only reason I'm alive. I did nothing, but I can take credit for what happened going forward from when I woke up from a coma, right? And so, the argument would be, well, if he can do it and he has all these problems, then I should be able to do it. And I would argue many times back and say, look, yes, but I had a motivation. My motivation was I didn't want my kids to push me in a wheelchair. Some of that's, definitely ego. And the other part is, like, I don't like to be a burden on other people. So I could have taken full Social Security. I could have been fully disabled. There was no part of me that ever was going to agree to that. So, and that was just, again, my understanding that I find a lot of value in myself by being valuable to other people. I didn't know that. Therapy and time taught me that, I have a lot of self-worth tied into having other people, find me valuable. I don't take a compliment well. Yeah. I hate when somebody tries to pick up the bill. Like, this is like, it's one of these things where, like, no, I have to be important to you. I can't count on you, because that would
even still.
I'm learning to be better.
I would think that nursing home kind of would teach you a little bit about having to rely on people, or was it a bad experience?
Again, it taught me patience. I wasn't a very patient person at all. I've learned patience. Now, I will say that when I can sit patiently, but when I decide to do something, then it's still, pedal to the metal. I have to go fast then, but I can sit and be quiet.
Yeah.
And wait for the commitment, wait for the opportunities, to be the right time for me.
On that same note, what do you think, like, what is the one thing that's most different about 2025 John versus 17 plus years ago? Like, it maybe not physically, because we know there's a lot of things that are different, but as a human, like, what's different about you?
I have a better understanding of the things that have shaped me, and to come to peace with that. Again,
would you say life before was autopilot?
Yeah, well, it was at that point,
Okay.
Again, this preconceived notion that, we talked about earlier, like exactly what it should look like, this picturesque ideal, that, is to check all these boxes. Well, again, there are a ton of us that will try to go out and replicate that over and over and literally push themselves away from their gut feelings, or towards a career that they don't love because it tracks with this ideal.
Which is not really ideal.
Yeah. And I had to learn to let go of it and understand that, one, I'm going to disappoint people when I do it, right? Because everyone's going to have this expectation that you should just be exactly the way you are. Two, that when you make the change, there's never going to be a perfect time. Like I always talk a lot about being intentional instead of perfect. Getting up and going to the gym every day. Some days it's a great day. Some days it's like today, I can barely squeeze it in. But I still went, and it's still better to be intentional than it is to expect that I have to wait for something to be perfect for me to do it. The paralysis by analysis situation has been real in my life, a lot. And, some of it's fear, I'm sure, but the other part is like, I need to be 100% sure I'm going to be successful before I do it, which again,
Safety.
I'm the kind of person who loves to plan everything too. So
that's control.
Yeah, that's control.
We like it.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer, so one of my other pillars that I talk about coaching is keeping score. I'm a big scorekeeper. My argument is always, how do you know if you're winning if you're not keeping score? I don't necessarily, say you have to hit a certain goal at a certain point, because again, I'm a big also believer in moving the goalposts, moving the finish line all the time, because you just like doing the thing you're doing. But
you're keeping score for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
I still have in journals that I still use today. It's literally sitting right here. I literally keep every workout I've ever done for the last 15 years since I started recovering from the car accident. And I have 19 books now sitting on a shelf.
Habits are good.
Yeah. And when I feel bad, I can go pull one from, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, and say, oh, that's what was going on back then. I could hardly move that weight. Oh, I just had another surgery. And so it's a reference for me also to help me remember that I've come a lot farther than I often give myself credit for.
When you said keeping score, my brain immediately went to like, so you can compare and judge other people. It's like, my score is much higher than yours, but it's really just against yourself.
Yeah. Again, it's just a matter of, I think that even when you look at some super successful business people, I think, there's a certain point where money is only just a scorekeeper for them, because they have all they need, but it's just a fact that your company's growing and being successful. What you do with it is up to you, but we measure everything on some level, and there's healthy ways to do it. I like to use it as a reference to remind me that I've made progress.
Yeah, no, because if you don't track it, how do you know? You just have to rely on like, I think I did
how do you know if you're winning?
Exactly. Yeah. And you set your own, like you said, move the goalpost,
Yeah.
Keep changing your goals so that you can chase whatever feels tenable at the time, or something maybe a little bit out of reach that kind of drives you to get there. But it's a competition of you versus you, right?
Yeah, because there was been plenty of times in the beginning of my recovery, particularly where I would set a goal and I'd achieve it and almost feel disappointed the next day.
Oh, yeah.
Because like now all of a sudden it was like, all right, what's
next?
What's next? Because now I liked the grind of holding myself accountable to the goal. And now I don't have that goal to hold me accountable. And am I going to slip backwards? Because I still think, the status quo is the hardest thing in the world to maintain. Everyone reaches a level and they're like, oh, I'm just going to stay here. But it's so hard. Like, it's hard not to go backwards, and you're trying not to push forward. So it's very difficult. So I always tell people, like, you reach a goal, move the goalpost, find another way to do it, because otherwise you're just going to lack motivation.
Yeah. Do you celebrate your wins?
I do.
Okay.
In
Did
fact,
you always?
My 8th pillar is celebrate your wins.
Oh, I love it. I was
like
terrible at that. You like trophies. Okay.
But trophies represent like everything from a picture of the Lifeline helicopter, Penn State's helicopter that rescued us, that came and basically saved my life. I've had the opportunity to speak to their entire organization. They shut down the whole organization. And so they presented me a flight suit and this photograph of them flying over the Pennsylvania State Capitol. So it's just on my wall, and it just reminds me that I made a change, and I was there because they were struggling as an organization that was very well oiled, but they had 4 departments, and these departments operated individually. I was there just to remind them that what they do is save people like me. I was just there to remind them that even though they're so efficient at what they do, it doesn't matter if they don't save people like me. And so, like, that's a trophy that I look at. I look at, I would later on go on to do these Spartan obstacle races where Spartan sponsored me to bring out other people who would be like, hey, if he can do it, let's go out and do it with him. I wasn't fast. I was strong. And so, I'd have 20 people doing their first race who, prepared to do it with me. So those medals, they don't remind me of finishing the race. They remind me of the people who were there with me.
Yeah.
I love photographs of stuff.
Memories.
Printed out and hung on a wall.
I love it. Did you always do that? Or does this accident kind of heighten it more?
Yeah, no, I think the accident, I've always valued things that reminded me of my grandparents, or things that reminded me of my parents, or things that reminded me of my childhood. I've always liked those types of things as a memento of that thing. Mm-hmm. I think that after the accident, it became more important to me to surround myself with those things so that it helped me to stay focused.
Yeah. Good reminders.
Yeah.
Of what you've accomplished. I love to kind of ask this similar question to everyone at the end, and wondering if you now could walk up to the John laying in that nursing home bed, relying on everyone else, can't do anything. Is there anything you would want to whisper in his ear or smack him around and tell him something?
One, it'll be a longer journey than you think. The second is that the journey itself will turn out to be the most beautiful part. That you'll push to get to somewhere that there's no reason to push yourself to get there. It's literally just the journey. And I don't think that at this point I would change any part of what happened to me. It's reshaped my life dramatically. Like I said, I just turned 54 years old. I should have been gone 17 years ago. So I've lived this extra 17 years. I've seen my kids grow up. I've had hardships. I've had big highs and lows. And at this point in my life, I can't see myself living any other way than the life I've lived through this accident. And I wouldn't have been that me. It wouldn't have been me at the nursing home for sure. It wouldn't have been me even a year or two afterwards. I was pushing so hard to get back to a normal life that I thought I wanted to have.
Yeah. I mean, you really, you take these setbacks, like you said, and you turn them into fuel and made your way to this version of you, which couldn't be this version of you unless you hit all those bumps and the things along the way. And sometimes it's hard to say out loud, right? Like I wouldn't change anything because part of it sucked, but I think, we're where we are because of what we did and what happened to us. And sometimes that can also be celebrated.
Yeah. I pride myself today on the people I can help more than anything at this point in my life. I heard a story told the other week, and I actually threw it on my Instagram and repeated it, but I felt it as like a real calling to me. And it's a story about this boy and walking on the beach, and there's hundreds of, if not thousands of starfish that have washed up onto the beach. And the little boy just starts picking them up and throwing them in the ocean. And this man sees them and he's like, I'm going to teach this kid a lesson. And he walks out and he says, there's so many starfish on the beach. He said, do you think you're making any difference by just throwing some of these back in? Boy doesn't say anything, reaches down, picks up a starfish, chucks it back out into the ocean, looks at him and says, I bet it made a difference for that one. And I was struggling with my book at the time. I didn't know if we were going to make bestseller lists. I didn't know if anybody was going to read it. And the thought was, you know what, if one person reads this book and makes some change in their life, then the hundreds of hours I put into it should be worth it, right? And I feel that way, about most of the things I do this day. And I didn't feel that way even when I was doing it 14, 15 years ago. I felt a different kind of drive then.
Yeah.
Now, my drive is, one, learn about myself, and two, impact one person.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be a lot more now. Bestseller list you have, plus the ripple effect that comes from all of that, which will be beautiful because helping that one person, then they can help someone else. Like you said, they take it, then they teach someone, they have the conversation, on and on. So good on you. If people want to connect with you, get in your circle, find your book, what's the best way to find you? Maybe even tell you how your story affected them.
Yeah. So johnulsh.com. It's everything there from my social links. Okay. All my social links are John Ulsh as well. So Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, definitely there. And then obviously even you can order my book at it's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all those places. If you want a bulk order of books for your company or for your organization, my website allows, you can go right to my website and order those books through there. We were fortunate. We did well over 1,000 books through businesses and nonprofits who wanted to share, including United Cerebral Palsy, with those kids with special needs and their parents. But definitely, again, we're posting constantly now on social, just some reels and some teaching stuff, just trying to give a little value in small segments. And then YouTube's got a lot of my keynotes and a lot of my talks, but that's long format stuff.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put the links definitely to your website, and then we can link your socials in the show notes so people can easily just click. We like that one click to get to you.
Yeah. And again, get to my website is great, but learning the Instagram and TikTok, those short reels. I always joke that Facebook came out about the same time the car accident did, and sort of kind of grew with my speaking. So, my 10, 11,000 followers on Facebook are all my parents' age, I think. I don't think my kids might have Facebook at 22 and 26, but I guarantee you they never look at it.
Yeah. It's just so they can have their Instagram account.
Yeah. Different world.
Yeah, totally. I highly recommend if you are listening to John's story and something resonated with you, just bug him. Just go to his website. There's probably a contact form there. Just tell him how his story affected you. I promise you, by sharing that with John, it'll give you power to your own story, because the more that we can share our story, the more that we're going to be able to connect with other people and give this permission to others. So I just appreciate you, John. Thank you for coming on this wild ride of the life shift. We never know where we're going to go, but we go somewhere. So thank you for that.
I appreciate it, Matt.
All right. I never know how to say goodbye, so I'm just going to say goodbye, and I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks again, John.
Thanks.